Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Rachel Gillespie, and I'll be your host. We'll give everybody just a minute or so to join and get settled, and then we'll get started. All right, we'll just go ahead and get started. Again, for those of you that just joined, good morning, welcome. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Rachel Gillespie, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. Today's webinar is all about transformation. So if your organization is struggling with bottlenecks, slow processes, and mountains of paperwork, you're definitely in the right place. I'm excited to introduce to you Bart Peluso. He's our VP of Marketing, and also James Spencer, Solution Architect. They're joining us today for the webinar to share how one forward-thinking county is tackling these exact challenges and is overcoming overwhelming inefficiencies and outdated systems by partnering with KnowledgeLake. So before we begin today, a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later today on demand. And we do encourage your participation. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat window. We have reserved time at the end for Q&A, and we would be happy to address your questions. So with that, Bart, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you everyone for joining. We're super excited to talk to you about taming the paper juggernaut. This involves the transition to digital county government using generative AI, which we believe is the most transformative technology in over 30 years. Just a few weeks ago, the AI Coalition for County Government was held in San Jose, and there they discussed the need for digital county government. There's a concept called the silver tsunami, and that involves retiring senior employees in the county and state municipalities and the challenge of replacing those employees that are so tenured. There's also the ever-going issue of smaller government, less funding, and there are still many municipalities, as well as many commercial organizations, that are still transitioning from paper and microfilm records to digitization and the cloud. And we're going to speak to a few of them today. There's an organization called the American Institute for Information Management, AIM, and they speak to the fact that 90% of all the information in the world is still on paper. That's 4 trillion paper documents in the US alone. And Gartner and McKinsey are agreed that about 30% of work time in the municipal space can be wasted on dealing with all that paper and looking for information. So there's certainly a need for digital county government. The end result is driving a better citizen experience. And there's some practical examples. I had moved from Austin, Texas to the Knoxville, Tennessee area, where they have MyTN in the state of Tennessee. So as I applied for everything from a driver's license to a fishing license, I went online to a portal, uploaded documents, and those documents were automatically processed. It's really amazing. But we have to begin with where we are now, whatever your organization is in terms of a stage of automation. And there is essentially 3 stages. There's the traditional concept of human labor. This is manual processes, people working with computers, working with manual and automated processes manually through a system. Then we've seen about 100 years ago, it seems like 100 years ago, in 2018, the advent of robotic process automation, where Speaker James and myself spent a lot of time founding what is now known as RPA and working with automating the processes. And we typically automated them through rules. Now, when one of those rules broke or there was an exception, the process needed manual intervention. Reality was that the automated processes known as bots worked for simple processes, but did not work when there was complexity or variance in the outcome. And this is where Automation 2.0 or synthetic labor comes in. It's a completely different approach to have a large language model or a generative AI center, because now the process goal, including the components that are human, as well as the components that are automated, are being checked and verified by generative AI, including confidence scoring to ensure that the outcome is at least 98% accurate. It truly changes the game. So let me give you a practical example. We have one organization, a customer with literally millions of property records. And some of those property records date back hundreds of years. They are digitizing those records from actual binded books and extracting data to process the records, ultimately for tax purposes, property taxes, as well as other reasons. AI built within our platform can literally check the property record for typographical errors. And that's what you're seeing in this screenshot example, as well as against all the other documents related to it, right? That's what we call reviewing the document within context. So optical character reading, or OCR, which was the first generation of data extraction, was just about the type of character. Then there was what we called computer vision or machine learning, circa 2018-ish, which enabled IT to write rules. Now it's generative AI that's looking at a document, be it a property record, be it an application. It's looking at it in the context of all the other records associated with it. And this is not something that's difficult to set up through IT. This is something that a government worker at any level, a customer service person, can do because it's drag and drop and you're typing in English. So this organization went from outsourcing 100% of their millions and millions of documents to just about 10% of that. Primarily the 10% with the confidence scores under, say, 98%, along with spot checking those with higher confidence scores. And this is occurring now. Let me share another example, or an associated example, which would be state and county municipalities that are dealing with legal records such as driver licenses and birth certificates. So when extracting data off a document, any document, as I said, we used to have to write a rule. Now generative AI is smart enough to compare the information against all other records. So it's reading the driver's license as well as the marriage license, as well as anything associated with a specific resident or a specific entity. Now, several of our customers offer citizens the ability to upload IDs along with handwritten documents. These handwritten documents are not just read, but they're actually understood by AI. And then they are processed in a completely automated way, freeing up government employees to work on more critical and mind-intensive work. whilst automating the mundane processing of documents. It's a very, very interesting time, but I wanted to point out the criticality here. AI and automation, what we call synthetic labor, is a coworker, not a replacement. It is a supportive role as AI acts as a coworker by handling repetitive tasks, allowing the humans to focus on creativity and strategy. We've seen this in the commercial space with Microsoft that launched its Copilot. There was a reason they referred to the AI technology as Copilot. As a matter of fact, I use Copilot to help build this presentation, which used to take me 2 to 4 hours and now took me about 10 minutes, right? It's about augmentation because AI enhances human capabilities. We're seeing that when people use ChatGPT. And collaboration. This can truly foster collaboration because the AI tools facilitate that collaboration by streamlining the workflows. Now, I'd like to take a moment here to talk a little bit about security and concerns with any AI tool. The two of them are hallucination, right? That's where AI could get something wrong. We cover that with confidence scoring, and James will speak a little bit about that. And in terms of security, it's critical that when processing those documents and running an automated workflow, that all the data stays within the tenant. So each of our county customers and our state customer had their own tenants. They could be in AWS, but they're usually in Azure. And within that tenant, none of the data leaks out. None of the data is used to populate the LMS, and all of Azure security protocols are there. However, within the organization, with different access rights, that information could be shared prudently at an appropriate level, fostering collaboration. There are many benefits of transitioning to digital county government. The first and foremost is accelerating the public service delivery. I remember many years ago driving at 6 o'clock in the morning and waiting for a driver's license, sitting on the sidewalk for hours. Here in the state of Tennessee, it was processed online very, very quickly, right? This is the end result of streamlining repetitive manual tasks. And because you're using AI to look at document and document processing flows in context, we're eliminating errors. We're ensuring accuracy of documents, preventing missing paperwork, calling out gaps, and sending those gaps to a human. Another really important aspect of the approach to digital county government through synthetic labor is an easy setup. So back in the days of that first generation of automation, there'll typically be a large GSI like Deloitte involved, and deployment took a whole lot of money, and it could be 6 to 18 months. We just deployed a customer in 37 days, and the programs are presented in a way that municipalities only pay for what they use because it's cloud-based. So it's really easy to set up. And that follows through with the actual workflows, setting up case management and document workflows. It's drag and drop and typing in English. It's cloud native and cloud-based and easy to do. Another benefit is the modernization of the processes. It's the transition of documents from actual paper or legacy systems like SharePoint, ECM, without expensive IT projects. That data is all migrated to the municipality's private tenant sitting in Azure, and those workflows, if they are pre-existing, can be migrated, or they can be developed quite easily again with drag and drop and English language. So having been, in this space for quite some time through the different iterations of automation, I mean, this is world changing, right? It is a really exciting time, and we're seeing specific use cases that are completely changing the citizen experience for many county and state governments. These are real, and we're going to talk about one, but you can see some of them in the news, whereas through the use of automation and AI, citizens are getting a better experience, and municipalities at the county and state level are becoming far more efficient, right? And the jobs of those individuals are being uplifted, where they're working on more important innovation type projects. So really, really exciting time. At this point, I think what we can do is turn it over to James Spencer for a live demo. And then from there, we could talk about some of the municipalities that have adopted this type of technology and field some questions in open discussion. James, are you ready for a demo?
I'm all set, Bart. Thank you very much. So let me go ahead and take control. And I'm also going to share just a very few quick slides to kind of set the stage before we jump into the demo. So just, excuse me, and actually, if you have any questions that pop up as I'm going through this, again, just a reminder, you can place those into the question window and we'll answer those as we go. So just very quickly before we run into the demo, I wanted to lay out what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time talking about a new opportunity that we have engaged with Lorain County in the state of Ohio. So I'll caveat up front by saying this is actually quite a new opportunity. This deal only just closed a few weeks ago, so the ink is still wet, to use the colloquialism. So we don't actually have anything in terms of actual improvement metrics or other elements such as those to talk about things that we have been able to successfully implement. This is going to be more talking about how we were selected and the solutions that we are excuse me, solutions we are implementing on behalf of Lorain County. But that said, there will be future webinars and other events where we have the stakeholders from Lorain County join us as well and talk live about the work that they've been doing with us and some of the KPIs and metrics that they have seen improved by implementation of the KnowledgeLake platform. So with that, let me one moment here, move on to the next one. So just very quickly, some background for those of you who are not familiar with Lorain County, just a bit of geography. It is a county that's located in northeastern Ohio. Just think about to the north, there's the Lake Erie, borders Lake Erie to the north. To the east, there is Cuyahoga County and Cleveland. A little bit further to the west is Toledo, and Columbus is to the southwest. So as you might imagine, steel was a prominent industry in this county, still is, in fact, in modern day. The county seat is located in a town called Elyria. It was founded in 1822. Interestingly enough, though, that first government was not sworn in until 1824. So actually, Lorain County just celebrated its bicentennial last year. And they're a fairly good-sized county, about a 320,000 population. So the challenge that came to us was actually brought to us by the Lorain County Record Center. And this came about because, as one might expect from the Record Center, they had such tremendous volumes of data. They were struggling on what to do with that. So when you think about some of the things that the Record Center is responsible for, certainly it's maintaining custody of the records themselves. And these can be almost anything. They can be property records. They can be fiscal details. They can be vital statistics. They can be court cases. And so really, the Record Center interfaces with many different elements across Lorain County. But it's not just simply collecting and archiving those documents, it's also managing the life cycle. So when documents are sent for archiving, they're also assigned a retention schedule because not every document needs to be maintained forever. And in Lorain County's case, they have something like almost 100 different retention schedules. And those, again, are dependent on what type of document this is. And some of those retention schedules come from various other departments within the county. Some of those are applied by Lorain County itself. Some of those come from the overarching state level, Ohio's various sunshine laws. So there's many different sources of retention. And so there's a lot of manual review that goes on in looking at records and deciding when do these need to be destroyed. There's also a big effort for digitization of records. There's, as Bart pointed out, a huge volume of paperwork. And in trying to make that easier, the county is working on digitizing it, but there's a tremendous backlog. And as I pointed out earlier, because Lorain County maintains records across the county, they really are a central hub for interfacing with many other elements across the county. So just for some context, the scale of this challenge here is that they've got about 11,000 file boxes stored in their archive center full of paper. And those date, all the way back to really 1824 when the county was founded. And if we just do some basic math on this, assuming that at minimum you can fit about 2,200 pages per box times 11,000 boxes, that's over 24 million pages of documents. And I should point out that only is the loose paperwork in the file boxes. There's also a separate file room that has some of those actually permanently bound books that Bart was talking about earlier. So in fact, that number is even higher. And so the challenge here is that Lorain County finds itself with a few different issues. They thought about potentially reaching out to outsource digitization of those records, but that would cost north of $3 million, which is prohibitively expensive. And similarly, they didn't run into much success with looking early on at various technology solution providers. So over a 10-month period, they evaluated about 8 software and services providers, and none of those were deemed sufficient to meet the county's needs. So fundamentally, what is it that made us different, and what made us something that Lorain County felt could suit their needs? Well, fundamentally, it all came down to the fact that, first of all, this is an integrated platform. As Bart mentioned, it is cloud native. But there are really 4 distinct components or elements underpinning our platform that really make this sufficient for meeting Lorain County's needs. The first of those is an AI-powered intelligent document processing capability. So fundamentally, the ability to have the KnowledgeLake platform ingest documents, automatically classify those, and extract key fields of information based on that document type. There's the ability to do workflow automation, which Bart was also mentioning earlier on. So a drag and drop interface that lets users decide, what does that workflow look like? What are they doing with data once it has been extracted from documents? There is certainly a legacy RPA capability, which is important for interacting with older applications, things like mainframes, which are still in use and don't have a modern API, and so can't really be plugged into modern workflows. And then finally, there's also this content management piece. How is it that we provide a wrapper around all of the data within the platform in ensuring that you're not left with what we might refer to as a digital junk drawer? So, and the good news here actually is that this is not something that is of use just to the Record Center. Again, through our initial conversation with the manager of the Record Center, it turns out there are actually several other departments within the county where there are applicable use cases and where they are going to roll out KnowledgeLake within the first year. So part of that is the clerk of courts, which, as everyone might imagine, is really everything to do with the court records. So civil proceedings, prosecuting felony cases, family law records, all of that is captured at the clerk of the courts level, and it is sent over to the Record Center for archiving and retention. Because everything's paper-based, when they need to pull back copies of those records for maybe a case that goes on appeal, that can be very challenging. It involves a lot of manual work. Someone in the Record Center has to look to see whether that record's been digitized, and if not, then they have to go down to the basement, find the paperwork in the archive room, and then either have it couriered over to the clerk of courts or scan it on demand and send it that way, which adds a tremendous amount of time to that processing window. Similarly, the clerk of the board is responsible for capturing all of the records of the board of commissioners. They meet monthly, and like with many counties, they consider things like what does the county budget look like, approving various different legislative initiatives, making proclamations, etc. Well, all of that information gets captured and gets recorded in an official record, and again, it gets sent off to the record center for archiving. Well, if anyone ever has a question about what happened in a particular proceeding, then again, someone has to go through, look up that record, and there's not really a way to search by field. They've actually got to go through and read the entire document from scratch. So again, very manual, takes a lot of time. There's also the fiscal department, anything to do with finance, so accounts payable, purchasing, travel requisitions, all of that information, again, is still done at a very manual paper level, and they're trying to find ways that they can use a digital capability to automate a lot of those workflows and speed up a lot of the financial workflows. And last but not least, this last one is not necessarily specific to a specific county department, but really affects the entire county, and those are freedom of information requests. Every county and every state across the US gets a number of these, from anywhere from individual citizens to news organizations to advocacy organizations. And anyone who's ever dealt with FOIA knows it takes a long time. A lot of manual effort goes into things like validating the request, locating the records, determining what needs to be redacted, and then sending those off to the requester. And those all have to be done within a short time window. And in fact, a lot of counties and a lot of states open themselves up to lawsuits by being unable to respond to those quickly enough. So these are some examples of where the KnowledgeLake platform will come into play in assisting Lorain County. So I think that's enough of setting the stage. I'm going to jump into the platform itself now and show you what this actually looks like. So if you'll give me just a moment to switch my windows here. Okay. So this first page that you're seeing right now is the landing page within the KnowledgeLake platform. Really, the key implication here is that this is just kind of like a quick directory of being able to take shortcuts to any element or any application within the KnowledgeLake platform. As a platform, it really is comprised of a number of different individual apps, but again, they're all completely integrated within our cloud platform. So to begin with, it's helpful to think about what sort of documents are going into KnowledgeLake. And that really can take a number of different shapes. So many organizations are already using some sort of document repository like SharePoint Online that has a taxonomy where it describes what documents or what record types can exist and what sort of metadata fields are available in there. And that is something that we would simply inherit. If we look at our destinations application, we can pull those existing document taxonomies from SharePoint Online. It's much easier than reinventing the wheel. Now, that isn't always the case. Sometimes there are documents that may exist outside of something that has that kind of structure to it, which is not a problem because we're then able to manually create that destination, create the document type. So destinations are not limited just to SharePoint Online. They can be really any number of other things. They can be a network file share site. They can be a database. They could be something like Azure Blob Storage. It just depends on where those documents are being stored at the end and how you want to capture them within the KnowledgeLake platform. So once you've done that, once you've decided on what type of repository you're using and how are you going to handle that information, then we have to look at details around what sort of documents are we bringing into KnowledgeLake and what are the key fields we want. Now, again, as I mentioned, if you're using something like SharePoint Online that already has taxonomy, that information's already captured and already available within the platform. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we need to go through and we need to actually specify specifically a certain type of document. And that's where we get into our intuitive AI application, which Bart was teasing earlier with the idea of prompting an LLM and using plain language. And this is where we can go about setting a document class, where we can tell KnowledgeLake what we're looking for and give it some important attributes. So in this case, I've got a couple different documents that Lorain County provided us as samples, one of these being a requisition. And if I go in here, I can tell KnowledgeLake what are the details that I want to extract from a requisition. And there are things you might expect. There are going to be details like an account number. What's the requisition amount? What's the date? Does it apply to a department? And so on and so forth. And what's interesting about this is it's not simply saying, okay, find me my department, find me the description, find me the financial amount, but we can also go a little bit deeper. We can specify what type of information is this. For most of these, it's simply a text record, like for department, but we can also choose specifically to look for a number or a date. We can extract data in tabular format. We can even make Booleans. And then finally, I'll point out there's this AI hint element. And this is really handy because what this enables us to do is to fine tune the artificial intelligence to help it find information that it may struggle with under normal circumstances. And in the example here of the description of what is included in a requisition, there may be multiple areas that have a description in that requisition paperwork, and they may not be the same. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just simply using plain language to prompt the AI to say, this is what I want. I want this specific type of description. Now, as Bart pointed out, the beauty of this is it's done entirely without code. You're explaining this in natural language, just like you would with a human employee, where if you're trying to tell someone what you want them to do, you would explain it to them, or you would write maybe this down in an email and send it to them. Well, the idea is the same here within KnowledgeLake. So we can create really any different class as needed. We inherit other classes based on the destination, just depending on what you're using. So the next thing to consider from here is how do we get information into KnowledgeLake? Because we have to start somewhere. Now, the easiest way to do this is just by simply uploading documents from your desktop. And this is kind of what that upload might look like, where you choose what documents or files you want to upload, and then choose what workflow those need to go to. But this is only one way to do this. There are really a number of other ways to bring data in. We can send information directly from a scanner. So if you've got a scan center, that information can get piped straight from the scanner into KnowledgeLake. You can bring information in from monitoring an email inbox, where KnowledgeLake will monitor that email, and as emails come in with attachments, it will take those and process them accordingly. We've got the ability to create web-based portals where users, either internally or externally, can enter records into forms and can upload information that way, attaching files. We've got the ability to send information directly from the Microsoft Office suite of applications. You can even connect to third-party APIs. So there's really a bunch of different ways to get data into KnowledgeLake, depending on what is needed for your specific workflow. Now, once you've done that, then we need to tell KnowledgeLake, what do we need to do with this information? We're not uploading it just for the sake of uploading it. We're doing it probably because we need to classify the document and extract the information from it and then do something else. And that's where our workflow app comes into play. This is where we're providing instructions to KnowledgeLake to say, what else do I want to do? And I'm going to jump into this one that I've built out again for Lorain County, make it a bigger so you can see it. And what you can see from the screen, again, Bart teased this earlier, is that this is a very simple drag and drop interface where you can choose pre-built stages from this menu on the left and add those onto this visual design canvas and move them around and link them as needed. Now, in my example here, this is very simple. It only has a few stages and there's no branching logic, but you can get pretty crazy here, and you can invoke sub processes, and you can have circular routines, and you can really build out whatever is needed. But this is, again, just conceptual, showing at a high level what we may want to do. And in this simple example, we're starting off with giving it a custom step. Custom steps exist for if you don't have what you need in one of the pre-configured steps, you can just add that here. And in this case, all I'm using for my custom step to do is to simply separate documents. And that's because many organizations like Lorain County, rather than scanning individual documents and submitting them that way to KnowledgeLake, they tend to scan in batches, particularly in the archiving use case where they're scanning entire boxes with thousands of documents or thousands of pages of documents. So those are not separated, so they just come really blasted in almost a continuous stream to KnowledgeLake. And so KnowledgeLake has to take the first step of saying, well, wait a second, let's separate these so we can review each document individually, because they're not, if they're not all the same class. If it's a box all of invoices, it doesn't matter. But if it's, say, some invoices and some HR records and some tax filings, then we need to find a way to separate those. So that's kind of an example of what that custom step might be used for. And once that's done, then we can move on to the intuitive AI element. So this is where the actual classification happens, where KnowledgeLake looks at a scanned image and says, oh, I understand, this is a resume, or this is an application for employment, or this is a transcript, whatever that might be. And once it's done that, then it can move on to the indexing stage, where it's going to pull out key values. So it's going to pull out metadata based on what that specific document type is. And then from there, I'm just simply saying, well, let's convert that to a searchable PDF. So we have an easy archival version, and let's upload it to a destination, in this case, SharePoint Online. So again, very high level, very notional, but this is entirely customizable, and it's something that you can really build out in whatever way meets your needs. So continuing with the example for Lorain County, though, once those documents have been classified, we go to the indexing step. Now, hopefully, ideally, most of that happens completely lights out. So what that really means is that KnowledgeLake is able to understand what document type it is looking at and is able to extract all fields with high confidence and have no issues. Of course, in the real world, that's not always the case, and things just go wrong, right? We may expect a high level of throughput, maybe around 70 to 80%, but there are always edge cases where maybe there are two document types that look very similar to each other, and KnowledgeLake is struggling to discern one from the other. Or maybe it's a poor scan quality, and even though we do have automated tools to do things like deskew and despeckle and clean the document up, it still is having trouble with a smudged field. Well, that's where the indexing app comes into play, where once KnowledgeLake runs into some trouble and says, wait a second, I need some help, then it can flag this information to a human to say, I need assistance. And this can go to a human agent who can log into the KnowledgeLake application and cast a critical eye over this and take a look at the indexing and see what's been captured and make changes as needed. So this is the interface that they would see when they log in. They're going to have a list of the documents they need to check on the left-hand side. The actual document thumbnail is presented, but we can also go through and see all the pages that make up a scanned document as well. And on the right-hand side, this is the index panel where it's going to show how it has classified a document and also what are the key pieces of information it's pulled from it. So we can see that this case, it has correctly classified this as a voucher. It's been able to extract the purchase order number. It's been able to extract the amount. It's got details for the vendor name. I mentioned earlier we can pull out data as tables. So we even made a tabular view of the data that was captured in this invoice. And so in this case, everything actually happens to be correct. But if we use a real world example where maybe it's not right, maybe this invoice number is wrong, we could actually have the indexer go through here and make changes to it. If that's a 2 instead of a 1 or a 7, they could easily make that change. And if they want to understand, well, where does this information come from? We also have the ability to even overlay OCR snippets to say, I want to understand, where did that amount come from? In this case, it's looking for the literal value, and it's going to show, oh, okay, it came, in this case, from the second, there's the second page, where it's got the full value here, $232,805. So this just, again, provides a very simplified interface for a human user to come through here to look at information that's been indexed by KnowledgeLake and to make a determination to whether or not anything needs to be changed. They could then save those documents and push those on for further work as needed. So the last point that I will show is our search. Because this is also, I think, very important. I mentioned earlier about the need to avoid a digital junk drawer, because it's all fine and dandy if we digitize our documents and upload them into the application, but it doesn't help very much if we can't find them after the fact. And in Lorain County's case, they really need to find those documents even after they've been digitized, because there's always a chance that someone's going to come back and say, I need to see that. Maybe they're undergoing a financial audit and they need to look at some records. Maybe they are working with the clerk of courts and there's a case that comes up for appeal and the prosecutor's office needs to review the case files, whatever that might be. Well, in that case, Lorain County needs a way to very quickly find the data and send it back to the requester. So in this case, again, since this is a very new opportunity with Lorain County and we're only just getting started, I don't have a specific Lorain County search set up, so I'm just going to use this HR search from a different demo, but it still gets the idea across to show you what this might look like. So I'm sure many of you have been in this situation before where you're trying to find documents. If I go back to the SharePoint example, where you run a keyword search and you get a whole slew of documents, and it takes some time to search through those to find what you're looking for. And that can be further compounded by the fact that, well, wait a second, there's multiple different SharePoint site collections and multiple different libraries within each site collection itself. So sometimes you've got to run the search in multiple places. It takes a few minutes to actually scroll through and find what you're looking for. And even then, you may be missing something. You may get results that are not very useful. So what KnowledgeLake is doing is it's providing a wrapper around that search capability to say, well, let's not just do a keyword search. Let's be a little bit more prescriptive. And so you can see an example of what that looks like here in this search window, which is also, again, fully configurable based on whatever user is using this and what they're looking for. So at the bottom, I do indeed have a full text search. So I've got the ability to do keyword searching on a document, but I can be much more prescriptive with my search, where I can say, look, in this case, we're already classifying the document. We've got different document classes, so I can limit my search to a specific type of document. In this HR example, maybe I'm looking for an employment contract or a W-4. I can limit my results. And similarly, if I'm looking for a specific employee, I can look up their employee ID or their name or their social security number or any other attribute that we are extracting. But by choosing the specific metadata field and looking just for that metadata field, we're no longer looking for keyword searches. We're only looking, again, in very targeted areas, which ensures we're bringing back a much narrower set of results, which is going to be much easier for us to go through and to review. And so if I just run this, I'm going to search for everything. I'm not going to look for any certain parameters. I get results that you might expect. I get a whole bunch of different files, and I've got some details here that tell me what kind of content type they are, and it's got other metadata like employee ID, first name, last name. Well, this in and of itself is not necessarily very useful. And so, because I didn't specify anything helpful. Well, what we can do is we actually have the power to do further refinement of the search results by grouping these. So maybe what I want to do to make this a little bit more reasonable is I want to start by grouping based on last name. Well, now my results take a little bit more of a structured approach to them, where I've got different results based on different employees' last names. And I can even further refine here. Maybe I also want to search secondarily by content type. And so now if we take the example of the last name Ackerman, I can expand that and see, oh, okay, we've got a very nice clean layout where I can see I've got employment applications, I've got an offer letters, I've got W-4. So we've got the ability to go through and to, again, stratify our return search results. And then from here, we've got the ability to do other things, like we can view this document within the application. We can download a copy of it. We can send that off to anyone who's requested it. So there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of capability around the search functionality as well. So with that, that was really everything I wanted to show at a very high level about what the KnowledgeLake platform is capable of doing, and kind of explaining the context that we're looking at using this with Lorain County and those 4 initial departments. So with that, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to pause, and I'm going to hand it back over to Bart.
Thank you so much, James. Every time I see that demo, I learn something new. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for sticking with us. Lorain County is just one example. There are many out there. These include New York, Chicago, and San Francisco housing authorities, as well as many, many other county and state governments. Now, each of these have their own individual use cases. So the way that we enlighten the large language model, which is making the AI smarter for that particular use case, can be different for each municipality and or customer. And some of that enlightenment is done on our end during the implementation and setup. And then it's continually augmented by the users themselves. So we are very interested in your particular use case. So this is how we would suggest getting started, is that you can schedule a pilot or a customized demo. These are not sales calls. In the case of a pilot, we can physically use your documents related to your particular use case with an engineer and work that through. If there are issues with personal information, we could do what we call a customized demo, and that's where we'll use some mock documents that are very similar, same type of handwriting, etc., to kind of walk through the specific use case or need on your side. And then finally, another way to get started is through a workshop. And that's where interdepartmentally you bring the right people to the virtual or actual table, and we'll send an engineer as well as one of our leadership team. We've been in the space a really long time. We've been working with a lot of municipalities as well as private entities, universities, etc. And we can do a bit of a workshop and say, hey, how can we take this process and automate it? How do we get these documents scanned? So I really, really encourage you to sign up for either a pilot or a customized demo or workshop. You can reach out to Rachel. Rachel's on the call at rachel.gillespie@knowledgelake.com. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Bart. Great presentation. Good job, you guys. We do have a couple of questions. If you don't mind, we'll roll through some Q&A. And just a quick reminder, if anybody does have any questions or if you want clarification on anything that James or Bart covered today, please type them into the question box. We'd be happy to hang on and answer those questions for you. Or as Bart mentioned, if you'd prefer to have a conversation offline, you can always email me. I'm happy to answer your questions or get you connected with the right resources. Okay, all right, first question, James, for you. How did the county identify and prioritize the specific bottlenecks? I think you touched on that a little bit, but can you elaborate just a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in this case, the originator really was Lorain County Records Department. It was their manager who looked at really all the workflows they were doing and just how much of it was manual and paper-based. And not only that, as I indicated earlier, really the record center has a touch point into really many of the 40 or 45 other offices within Lorain County. And so they were able to communicate with their peers, say at the clerk of courts, and discuss, well, what about this workflow makes sense to you, or what do you see as the challenges? And so they were really kind of the central interface of some of the challenges that were experienced not only within their own office, but across the county. And so that was really kind of the nub of this, the origin that really was what got them thinking about, are there technological solutions? And then from there, it was a matter of doing the due diligence and going out there and finding different technology companies and evaluating them to see which ones met the county's needs and could help be broadly applicable across most of those problem areas. So that's really how that got started.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Another question here. What were the key factors that led the county to choose KnowledgeLake over another document management system?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, well, really, they're all great questions, obviously. But in this case, I touched a little bit on this in the demo itself, or my slides before that, where I referenced that I think Lorain County spoke with about 8 different vendors over a 10-month period, conducted evaluations of those, and none of them really quite met the needs. And a lot of those challenges came down to things like, as Bart indicated earlier, very heavy, expensive manual implementation windows, a lot of platforms that masquerade as platforms, but really are a bunch of discrete elements that aren't very well integrated together. So fundamentally, there were a few key pieces that made KnowledgeLake have a competitive value proposition. So as Bart indicated again earlier, the fact that it's cloud native makes it very easy to operate. There's very little work that's required on the county side to do. And there's really not much to do on an implementation side of the house. So it's very easy to set up. Furthermore, the fact that I pointed out earlier, there's these 4 key pillars underpinning our platform. There's the IDP capability, there's the workflow automation capability, there's the content management, and there's even that legacy RPA element. And the fact that all of those are fully integrated within the platform, as you saw during the demo, really makes this very easy to use. So they don't have all these different disparate bits and pieces. And finally, all of that was presented and packaged in a very attractive cost point. So it made a lot of sense for Lorain County. It was far cheaper, of course, than doing the document digitization outsourcing at $3 million. So those were some of the elements that I think really made us stand out in the eyes of Lorain County.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, we have another question. How is KnowledgeLake working with the county to ensure a smooth transition and minimize disruptions during implementation or as part of the implementation?
Yeah, another great one. So in this case, as with really any project, I think communication is key. It's really essential to ensure that all the stakeholders are communicating openly with each other. They're in agreement of what needs to be done. And so to that point, there are a couple things that we do on the KnowledgeLake side to simplify that. So at the start of any project, there is a kickoff meeting where, again, we get all those stakeholders together in a room. We get all of the key individuals on the KnowledgeLake side together as well. And everyone does a full deep dive review of the project plan that's recommended, all the different deliverables that are going to be doing, the schedule, et cetera, to make sure everyone's still in agreement. But above and beyond that, there are also even pre-kickoffs. In fact, we just did one of these a few weeks ago with Lorain County, where we kind of started setting the groundwork to explain to them, this is what the kickoff is going to involve, and these are the key people to be involved. These are some of the timelines to think of. Again, there's not a lot of implementation work that has to be done because this is a cloud-based solution, but there was some setting the stage for that and giving them a checklist of things that they could at least start mulling over before we get to the deep dive kickoff. So being able to share information bidirectionally and have regular touch points really is key to ensure that everyone's on the same page and that there aren't any hiccups and that there aren't there's no confusion. So those are, I think, really the most important elements here.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions come in, so we can start to wrap things up today. I'll glance at it one more time right before we end, just to make sure we're not missing anything. But yeah, we can definitely wrap up and give everybody a few minutes back in your day. So just a quick reminder for everybody, Bright Talk will send you an email after, probably later today, with a link to view the recording of today's webinar. So be on the lookout for that. Feel free to share it with your colleagues. And of course, if you have additional questions or if you need more information, please reach out. I've got my email address there on the screen. I've also posted it in the announcements section. We've also got the form that you can complete to request a custom demo, consultation, conversation, whatever it is that you need from us. We are happy to assist and be a resource for you. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. One more quick look at the questions. I don't see any questions, so we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day. Thanks for joining us.